You've got to build the company. You've got to sign all the papers. You've got to potentially raise some funding. You've got to try and find product market fit. You've got to find your first customers.
Ideally, you would have an agent that you give the task, you leave your desk, and you have a pull request or some form of deliverable when you come back.
When you can have 10 AI agents working for you, it makes no sense to work for someone else.
People in general will be 20% more productive. My question is 20% more productive doing what?
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to the Generation AI podcast, where every week we break down the latest trends, tools, and strategies in AI. So if you're building and you're looking to separate the signal from the noise, this is the podcast for you. Welcome to episode number what, Mihai?
Episode number 13. If you're a constant listener, thanks for being with us again. We have 4 topics for you today. Quite a few things happened, so we'll go through, we'll talk again about coding agents and tangentially vibe coding with OpenAI launching Codex. We'll talk about Audible. Last week on the podcast, we spoke about how audio and sound in general will be the next modality for interacting with AI agents. We'll speak about how Audible expands their AI-narrated audiobook library. What are we going to talk about next?
Well, I think easily the biggest AI news of the week is just Eric Schmidt's perspective on AI in general. When the ex-CEO of Google gives his thoughts on the AI race and the development of AI, I think everybody should sit down and listen. But that's just me.
We have some hot takes from that TED Talk. I've listened to it. There's some bold statements there.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, we're going to conclude with OpenAI buying product company IO for, I think, 6 or 7 billion with the goal of getting into hardware and building AI companions. Let's start with the first topic. So OpenAI launches Codex. We spoke quite a lot on the podcast about coding agents, coding tools, Lovable, Cursor, Copilot, these kind of things. It seems to be a growing trend, and it seems that more companies are building in this space, trying to ideally create the agent for coding. So ideally, you wouldn't have just a language model that you ask a question, you get some code as a result, but ideally, you would have an agent that you give the task, you leave your desk, and you have a pull request or some form of deliverable when you come back. What's your take on this, and why do you think OpenAI launched this right now when they had coding tools in the past? They had powerful language models.
I think we're seeing the verticalization of these LLMs, right? I think that's what's happening, and I think the first use case is coding agents. This is basically OpenAI's attempt to capture the application layer at the business level. If they can be the operating system for building code in enterprises, in companies, then that's a $1 trillion opportunity. Like literally, that's $1 trillion company on its own. So yeah, for me, the move here is pretty obvious. But from your perspective, how likely do you think they are to be successful, and how would you compare this to something like Cursor, for instance?
So as a software engineer myself, we always want to work on the cool features. We always want to work to build nice things, and instead of fixing bugs, refactoring code, removing legacy code, and this kind of things. These kind of tasks arrive in the backlog and sometimes are forgotten there for weeks, months, or forever. And I think tools like this, like Codex, are great for those kind of tasks that no one wants to do, because engineers want to focus on building value, not necessarily fixing
debugging
code or debug. Debugging is a different thing, right? But also debugging, finding issues, refactoring code, making code bases more efficient, these kind of things. For those type of use cases, I think this kind of agents like Codex are a great fit. And as Sam Altman posted on Twitter, X, He says that it is a software engineering agent that runs in the cloud and does tasks for you, like writing a new feature or fixing a bug. And he says that he can easily run many tasks in parallel. And I think, again, we talked on the podcast about how the job of the future will involve managing AI agents. I think it's true in this case as well. So the more you write good specs in your tickets, in your product documents, the easier it will be for this kind of agents to pick up your intent and deliver the feature you're actually expecting instead of diverging or hallucinating and creating rubbish. So you asked me, how does this compare with Cursor? I think Cursor is more, I think there's somehow the same thing in a way. They're both coding agents. I feel like OpenAI is trying to create something bigger than Cursor. So Cursor is just an assistant that lives in your development environment and helps you with some tasks. It's more geared towards engineers. I feel like Codex is, you don't need to be an engineer to use Codex, given how they presented it. You can be a product manager, you can be a scrum master, an engineering lead, just prompting it and giving it tasks. And based on how they described it, it should be capable of doing the full cycle, taking a task.
Maybe there's like a, sorry to interrupt, but maybe there's like a no and low code stack developing. Like we've talked a lot on this podcast about tools like Lovable, that build essentially great demos, right? Like a great front end experience, but it's not something that's actually able to scale. And maybe it's the case that Lovable will never become that end-to-end application development platform, and instead you'll use Lovable for the first initial design, and then you'll use Codex to actually go and fix all of the back-end code, for instance, so that you can actually scale this up into production. Over time, I think we'll probably see like agencies evolve, for instance, that use these tools in combination with each other, because that's actually the hard bit, right? Like I don't think there's going to be one tool to rule them all that just has every possible use case covered in terms of application development. I think there's always going to be gaps. So I think the skill is going to be, what tool do I use? How do I use them in combinations with other tools? And at what part in the production process do I use each tool? There's probably a really good niche there for an agency that can use all of these tools in combination with each other.
I think the market is big enough for this kind of tool. So as you said, there's not going to be a one size fits all approach is going to take all of the market. We're going to have Cursor, Copilot, Codex, individual agents, and I'm sure many others coming from new
But
startups.
there'll be niches, right? I think right now we're just calling everything a coding agent, but over time there'll be the various agents will become specialized at a specific set of tasks.
The comparison I was about to make would have been with software engineers. So there's no one size fits all software engineering type. We have front-end engineers, back-end engineers, DevOps, AI, machine learning, data scientists. I think we'll see the same pattern with coding agents. Maybe Codex will be better at full stack. Maybe Copilot will be better at something else. And I think we'll see, as you said, we'll see them working together, like in a real software engineering team, to accomplish bigger tasks.
Yeah.
But we'll cover for sure this topic in future episodes. It feels to me like a hot topic together with audio. And speaking of audio,
nice transition. You're such a pro these days.
Yes. Audible, a company that I've been using products for many years now. What they do, long story short, is they give you access to audiobooks. So you can listen to your favorite books on the go in your headphones. Well, historically, they had human people read the books and record that, so you can hear the person speaking. Sometimes it's the author, sometimes it's a different person. Now they got into the space of AI-narrated audiobooks, and I feel like this would have been a natural transition over time because it's such low-hanging fruit. The question is, where is this going, right? Because if we have AI-generated books read by AI, do you think the value of a book in general will go down?
No, absolutely not. No. What? So, out of interest, why would you think it would?
I got an ad a few days ago. I was listening to something on YouTube, and an ad came in of the form, "Hey, we have this platform. You only have to give us your rough idea. Will AI generate a book for you and publish it?" What if everybody just prompts this app, and all of a sudden we have millions of books on the market AI generated? Do you think those books will be as valuable as books written by actual people with actual experience?
Here's a more philosophical question. What is more important, the idea or the language that you use to describe the idea? Because in my opinion, like I can speak personally from like the script writing process when developing videos for the YouTube channel. Like I personally don't like the process of building a script, actually scripting out all of the various points that I'm going to say. I find it a really tedious and boring process. But what I really do like is coming up with the ideas and the concepts and the frameworks. And for me, this part is this is the part of the process that is way more creative, way more fun, way more interesting. But the process and when I have to actually translate it into kind of language that everybody can understand, not so fun. So if it makes it way easier for everybody to put their ideas across, I still think the best ideas will win. It may be more difficult to decipher what good ideas from bad ideas because there's so many more ideas. But this is kind of like a similar thing that happened with, YouTube. Like we used to have 5 TV channels. Now anybody can become their own media company. And we now have 100x more content. But ultimately, we have algorithms that are designed to help us find the content that we want. So I think it will probably work in a similar way with AI, where, okay, sure, there'll be a shitload more content, but we'll also probably have algorithms that help us find the content that we want to watch or that we want to listen to or the books that we want to read. And I think the idea that there will be way more ideas because it's now more easy to communicate your ideas is a great thing.
I think what you said is right in the sense that the ideas are the most valuable things, and usually people put them nicely in a book so people can enjoy the ideas of that person. But wouldn't this mean that we'll end up in an unnecessary loop of the form? You have great ideas, you ask AI to write a 100-page book about your ideas. I, as a consumer, use my AI to read that book and summarize the main things. And I will end up reading your initial ideas summarized by my language model. Do you think the book step is necessary anymore if you can convey your ideas in short form?
It's an interesting point. I think ultimately the ideas are what's important, right? And to be honest, when I read most books, I kind of get the ideas pretty quickly, and I feel like most of the pages is just filling space anyway. So you could say that this problem existed long before we had AI, um, and I think increasingly you will just use AI to. I think what's interesting about AI now is as well is it changes the process of reading the book because you can find what's interesting to you way more quickly. So, for instance, if I pick up a book about emotional intelligence and I say, okay, summarize the 10 concepts that this book is describing, I can then get that prompt back from ChatGPT. It can tell me what those 10 ideas are. And I can say, okay, well, I'm actually really interested in idea 7. Tell me more about that. Whereas previously, I would have had to like go through all the chapters, find the chapter that interested me most, and then get to the point in the chapter that was interesting, and then wonder whether any of this idea was discussed in the other 200 pages, but not know where to find it on the other 200 pages. So I think it's all positive. It helps us to not only describe our ideas more clearly, but also understand other people's ideas more clearly. So I think it's a net positive, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
One thing linked to this is the whole idea of an embedding that we've heard more of in the last 2 and 3 years taught us that we actually don't want to build fluff around the information we're trying to convey.
We
So
just
our
want the information.
information is can be condensed in a small latent space. And I feel like this whole idea of embedding content.
What's embedding, just so people are aware?
Sure. So this is how language models work. They take a huge chunk of text, they transform it into numbers, and those numbers they condense in a let's say 1,000 dimension vector. So it's a list of 1,000 numbers. And ideally, and this is the whole concept around semantic understanding, ideally you would have all the text in the world condensed into a mathematical space. That's basically, if you sample that space, it's ideas, it's meaning, it's words, right? And
So you could
people,
condense all human understanding down to a bunch of numbers.
you've just described large language models.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, this is what large language models do. And I think, as you pointed out, all that matters is the ideas. People build fluff around the ideas and build longer than needed books, only for people to summarize those books with the same language models
The best example
with
I can
their
think of,
yeah.
there was this book called, I think it was like Tony Robbins, who's like the world's best motivational speaker. He goes on like tours everywhere, and he wrote a book on like 7 tips to financial freedom, and he interviewed like all of the world's best top hedge fund managers and investment bankers, basically the world's best investors. And he was trying to find like what is the source of growing your wealth. And it was a 400-page book. It was like 40 interviews, and the entire thing could literally have been boiled down to invest in index funds, buy the S&P 500. Like it was literally, but there was all of this freaking padding. Um, and you had to read all 500 pages because maybe, he spends 450 pages talking about this one idea. But if you don't read the last 50 pages, there might have been a second idea which he completely left to the end. And so you have to read the whole book to make sure you're not missing anything. God, it's annoying.
I agree. Cool. In interest of time, let's move on to the third topic. So I think this is the most interesting topic from the podcast. What do you have?
Oh, I'll try and be brief, but essentially, Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google, this week did a TED Talk to give his opinion about AI and where we are in the AI development. And we use the word hype a lot in this podcast, and we talk about a hype bubble. But he came out on the other side and said that actually, if anything, AI is underhyped. And there were various things that he spoke about, and he said what we're all thinking, right? Which is actually the end game for AI itself is that it automates and takes care of all business processes. Like the end game for AI is not to have is to have 0 employees inside a company ultimately. And sure, you can say that we'll become more productive, and we will. But it was really interesting the way that he was talking about this. I think the most interesting thing is he said 2 things. One is that all business processes will be automated, and I agree with him. If you look at even the robo taxis in Austin today, I think a couple of weeks ago, Uber released data to say that robo taxis driving around Austin are 99% more productive than human drivers, or that in 99% of occurrences, the robo taxis are more efficient. So he said that all business processes are going to be automated, but he also said that as a result of that, human productivity will increase by 20% per year. And if that is correct, then we're looking at something that makes the Industrial Revolution look like a tea party. There is no historical comparison to what a 20% per year improvement in human productivity looked like. And he therefore concluded that AI itself is the most transformative and meaningful technological innovation in the last 500 years. Over to you.
I'll give my take in a second. I just have a brief question for you. So you said that based on the TED Talk, the idea is that AI will replace all the people in your company, so you have 0 employees, and then you're saying that the people in general will be 20% more productive. My
Doing
question
what?
is 20% more productive doing what?
And that's the really interesting thing, right? Because as soon as you hear all business processes are going to be automated, you think, okay, so that means humans aren't going to be doing anything then. Uh, but he's saying humans won't have jobs and will be more productive. How can that be? I
I
I
think
think
we'll see new jobs. Sorry, I think I jumped over.
no, it's fine, but I suppose it comes back to this idea economy, right? If all business processes become automated, there are so many things today that humans do instead of. If you look at my scripting process, my YouTube channel is a really great example. It would have taken me hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours to make a YouTube video if I didn't have ChatGPT because I couldn't research, I couldn't script effectively. So the ideas which is the real value in creating a YouTube video, it would have been lost in all of this busy work. But instead, my productivity is 10x because I can just focus on the ideas and not of all the fluff around it.
So you're saying that AI will automate the boring jobs, which I agree with. So to give my take on the whole TED Talk thing, I think it's very interesting. So if you've listened to this point, it might also be worth it after the podcast to listen to this TED Talk, linked in the show notes. He's making some bold statements there. So he
What was
is
the
saying that
boldest in your view? What did he say that shocked you?
AI is underhyped. And I agree. So this will sound weird. I agree with both statements that AI is overhyped and AI is underhyped, just because AI is such a broad term that it can mean many things to many people. I feel like some areas of AI are overhyped, like AI agents. In my opinion, in order to have true agents, you need to give them autonomy and they need to run by themselves, take their own decisions without human input, and they should be able to do whatever they want and have full autonomy. So I think the way companies frame AI agents currently is overhyped. I do believe that the true value of AI is underhyped. So I think AI is here to stay. It's not like some applications of blockchain that we've seen with NFTs and this kind of things. I think AI is fundamentally the technology of this century. And I think
Mm.
it's over the next 20, 30, 40 years, we'll see crazy improvements in this area. We'll get closer to AGI. That's a hard one to achieve, but we'll inch closer to that goal. And I think the really powerful and valuable use cases of AI are underhyped, and we'll see more and more improvements in this area.
I think it's all a question. It's all a question of time frame, really. I think it's AI is probably overhyped in the short term and underhyped in the long term. I think that's probably what everybody's getting at. Um, but the really interesting thing for me is, what is the future of work going to look like? And it reminds me of a singer that I used to like called Jim Morrison. And but bear with me on this one. But he was clearly on some like LSD or something when he was being interviewed, and this was like back in the 70s, right? When all of the rock bands were obviously at their height, and you had the Beatles and Led Zeppelin, and all of these bands, and they're all obviously instrument based, right? So you have one guy on guitar, you have another on drums, etc., etc. And he said, I can foresee a time in the future where there'll be just one man stood in front of everyone, surrounded by a series of machines and tapes. And what he was describing was the DJ, right? And so we had this situation where you needed this whole kind of, and if we go back hundreds of years, you needed a whole orchestra to make a band, and then we had these five people, and now we have just this one guy just making the most incredible sounds. And I think it's kind of going to work the same way with AI. I think in 10 years' time, one person will be able to achieve 100x today of what they could today in terms of their productivity, because it will be one guy just surrounded by a series of agents.
So you're saying that companies will have less and less people, and this naturally means
No,
that those
no, I
people will
don't.
form more and more companies, small
I think it will
companies.
become way more easier to form. Yeah, I think in 10 years' time, I predict that way more people will be working for themselves than working for companies. Like, I think the whole nature of work, when you can have 10 AI agents working for you, it makes no sense to work for someone else.
And we've seen this with the recent Microsoft layoffs. I think they laid off some thousands of people. And I always wonder, what are those thousands of people doing? And one of the potential answers is starting companies, which is great. Because this is how you build small chunks of the future, just building niche companies in a group of a few people, like we're doing
100%.
with Generation AI.
And if you
Cool.
think about just very, very briefly, I know you want to move on, but and we can even make this the last topic. But if you think about it today, there are so many barriers to starting a company, right? You've got to build the company, you've got to sign all the papers, you've got to potentially raise some funding, you've got to you've got to try and find product market fit, you've got to find your first customers. The the percentage of businesses that fail is like crazy high. And it's just like starting a company is really, 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 really hard. If AI makes that easier, like significantly easier, that's how we unlock the 20% improvement in productivity per year per person, in
So
my
you're saying
opinion.
that AI will make it easier to start companies.
It will democratize capitalism potentially.
That's a good one. Let's make the last topic very brief, and we'll get more into details next week. So, last topic is about OpenAI acquiring John Ives' company. I think it's called IO, if I'm not mistaken. They acquired it for about 6 or 7 billion, with the goal of not only building the great software we know OpenAI for, but also hardware. And they mentioned that the next gen hardware product is going to be something, they haven't defined the shape and form, that's going to be with you 24/7, is going to perceive your environment, listen to the world, see the world, and basically store information of everything that's happening around you. So you could call them digital twins, but not the digital twins we've seen so far that are software digital twins, but also but both software and hardware. My question is, will this work? Because we've seen this before with a humane AI pin. A company a few years ago built this pin that you would put on your t-shirt. It'll have no interface, no screen, but only just a camera and I think a microphone. And it'll just scan the world around you and will store all that information somewhere in the cloud for the AI to have better context later. What's your take on this, and where do you see this going?
Well, I'm interested in your take. I've done a lot of talking on today's podcast, right? But it's particularly interesting to hear an engineer's perspective because up until now with OpenAI, we're largely talking about software, right?
Yes.
Or at least the software component about AI, of AI. So how do you think this is going to play out on the hardware side, with hardware and software together?
I mean, if they achieve in hardware what they achieved in software, I think we're going to see a big leap in terms of the next generation of gadgets. I would love in a few years to leave my phone at home and only have a small thing on my t-shirt that sees the world, talks with me, allows me to take phone calls, or maybe even better, takes phone calls on my behalf. So I would love to have this kind of AI companion that is aware of everything that's happening around me. So in case I miss something, in case I need some context later that I wasn't aware of, it will know all the things that happened around me. So I think we'll see this kind of invisible or tiny AI companions that you have all the time with you. And some people might argue that this is what your phone does, but it's not, I would say it's not an end-to-end AI companion. It doesn't see the
But
world. It might hear it, that we don't know. But it's not a full stack AI companion.
again, if you go back to the Eric Schmidt talk, I think he talked about 30 gigawatts of power being necessary for AI. A gigawatt just for reference, 1 gigawatt is essentially what it takes to power a major city. So we're talking about essentially 30 new major cities. And that's with the current use cases, right? Can you imagine how much data and computation a pin would need if it's taking in all real-time data from your entire surroundings in real time for billions of people? Like, we're going to need literally millions of times more energy potentially to actually run all of this compute if these use cases is to be believed, right?
So it's either going to be extremely expensive, or people will find a way to produce energy at significantly lower cost. Which, and I'm bullish on the second one, because it's the only way to move forward, to find engineering problems, engineering solutions to these kind of problems.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's a fascinating thing to see how it's going to play out, because the thing is the if you have these pins that follow everyone around and bring in real-time context, let's say you start to make that pin understand, I don't know, your diabetes markers, and therefore that pin is actually really important for you. When we have the next World War, this is the point that Eric Schmidt made. Like, we're going to get to the point where if you bomb a country's data center, you can take out all of this AI that people will likely be depending on.
Yeah,
So
we talked
it's
about over reliance on AI. I think this sounds nice in a science fiction context where everything is robot based and AI based. But realistically, I don't think we're there yet, and we might not be there in 20, 30 years. So I'm not bullish on over relying on AI.
exactly. And with that, I think we should close things up for today. Mihai, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we've got to episode 13. Happy to keep this going to episode 100. And yeah, I think the AI world is moving quite fast.
Cool. All right, guys, see you this time next week. Over and out. Cheers.